So thank you everybody and welcome to this session today, and I hope you enjoy it and I hope you like it. So it's called Making the Most of Your Language and Your Hobby, because Gothic is not just something that we study, it's a hobby for most of us, it's a passion. But I want to talk about it from the second language learning and in the Gothic context, okay? So let's see how it goes. Yeah, sometimes it feels like that, yeah. Okay, so this is what I'm going to try to cover. You see, I had two modules initially, but then it was far too long and I was going off the tangent. So I just kept it short and sweet. But then we can always extend if you have questions at the end. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of an introduction about myself and the project. Then I'm going to talk about the division between language and literature in the second language teaching and the relevance with the Gothic. This is where it gets complicated. Then teaching through the Gothic, what is important to me, this is my experience, but then also research. So the importance that empathy, curiosity, and motivation have when learning anything, but specifically the Gothic. The benefits that we have in our brains, on our brains, how can we apply the Gothic in the different areas of the language? But here is where I'm not going to extend too much, because the temptation is to go into areas of the language, what you should be teaching. No, not today. And then what I've done is to create some Gothic elements that you can find when teaching the second language. And then obviously at the end, we'll have the Q&A. Okay, so this is me. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project and what I've been doing, my background too. So I've been teaching English for more than 20 years, sometimes Spanish too, depending on the demand that I had in my academy. And the one thing I realized, the one thing I noticed, it was that from my own experience as a student first, and then as a teacher, that my students showed higher motivation, engagement, and quicker results when learning the language in the context, rather than just the prescriptive English that we all tend to be taught that way initially. So I've tried to move away a little bit. That was a little bit hard to move away because of parents mainly, because we still have got this brain that we have to learn in a certain way. But what I realized that teaching through the Gothic, I made my students, I contributed with a better ways of thinking. So with a critical thinking, I'm talking about here. So they became better thinkers and communicators. And that was independently of their jobs. So I want to move away from the idea that Gothic maybe is only studied in the academia, or just it's a hobby that a few people have at the weekends, you know, watching films or reading certain types of books. It's something that gets to everybody, and it can help everybody with different backgrounds and different ages. So this happens because the Gothic provides stories that trigger the students' critical thinking, and the Gothic gets people out of their comfort zone, so they have to find solutions to their problems. And here is where we have all the questions that we can create around the Gothic text. So it's a very good element. So basically, the project is the result of a real market necessity of adapting the learning of the second language to something more engaging, more practical, more holistic. You know, people want quick results and they are a little bit bored from the traditional way. So this is the intention. This is what I've been doing, and I've been a little bit successful with this. If you could have some of my students' opinions, you will see that, yeah, I never knew even what Gothic was. Great, we're doing 3 jobs. We're thinking critically, we're learning second language, and we're learning about the Gothic and everything that comes with it. So, okay, next one, if he wants to move. There we go. Right. So let's see if you agree with this quote from Brumfield and Carter that says that literature offers a context in which exploration and discussion of content, which if appropriately selected can be an important motivation for study, led on naturally to examination language. It's a very long quote, but as you can see, it makes a lot of sense. So first, I'm not just talking about the Gothic, I'm talking about literature in general. Yes, is this context where we can explore, we can discuss, which is very critical when we are learning a second language. And if we select it appropriately, it can trigger this motivation, which is something that I'm going to talk about later, super important, motivation, but in a natural way, okay? So we examine the language in a natural context. So why we still have this kind of division between language and literature? right? We still something that we are trying to break the mold. So there's a study, there's a case, Simona Magee. She talks about the learning of the Gothic through the learning of the language through the literature, Gothic literature. So she has this paper called The Strange Case of Teaching English Through the Gothic Novel. And she says there that there are still many second language teachers that make the language and literature exclusive from each other, when really it's something that is inclusive. I mean, literature wouldn't exist without the language. But the thing is that without the language, the language is molded by literature, because literature brings the culture. So they feed each other. So they all, they need to be in this context, even though we tend to separate them. But this is all something that not just the second language teachers, it's a curriculum problem. She says in her document, it's a curriculum problem. And because of that, we still find that we can only do masters in language or masters in literature. And when you find, like I did do some research the other day to see if anything has changed, when we look for masters in both, there are some universities now doing it, but they're still like very shy, certain academia, they're still very shy in doing it this way. And they say, well, it's not really a recognized diploma or certificate, but yeah, we're there. So they're a bit shy still. So I think it's something to really move on. So if we think about it in Spain, this is what we get, right? I keep looking and you just get crickets. I don't know what is the experience in other people's countries, because obviously in the UK, that's not a problem. In the States, that's not a problem. But in Spain, we have maybe like pockets of groups of people analyzing, studying the Gothic. But I don't know up to what extent they are using it to teach the language, which is the second problem. So we have, yes, some academia studying the Gothic, but maybe concentrating too much in the classics, which is great. We need to know that. But there's a big gap with what's happening now. For example, in my case, I had to do a lot of research in my own country, because at school, they never told me this is a Gothic text. The first time I heard the word Gothic in an academic context was in a university, never in the school, never in secondary school, which is kind of a problem. So I'm going to teach you, I'm going to show you the three main points, the benefits of learning a foreign language through the Gothic literature, mainly from the linguistics, the literary point of view, and the culture. Okay, we have some, well, I suppose the comments, I can see the comments, but we'll talk about them later, right? Yes, Sam? Yeah, okay. So we're going to start with linguistics. So the context. So we have that, I keep going okay, the language in context, that's right. So when working through the Gothic, we are working on the linguistic side of it. So what do we get from this? So we have exposure to different linguistic registers. That's formal versus informal, which is something that we need to identify when we are learning a language. So we don't always speak standard British English, like Queen's English or slang. So we need a balance. We need to know everything. We are exposed to substantives connected to gender, identity, age, social roles, monsters. You have all sorts of monsters and creatures, jargon, and other disciplines. Another thing that the Gothic does is exposure to a great variety of adjectives to describe characters and places. It's a very good environment for great descriptions, because we're trying to describe feelings, the more complex ideas, things that we cannot see. So there's a huge effort trying to describe what we feel, what we see, and we can find it. So we need to make the effort in a natural, even if it's your own language. So imagine in a second language, your brain is working 100 miles per hour there. Then we also have exposure to grammatical structures. Obviously, we have to work on all the tenses together. In a normal class, in a prescriptive class, we would have, now today we're going to talk about the past simple, and everything is isolated. And then you have examples, you have exercises to practice, automatized. But in a text, what do you have? You have the beauty that you have the past with the present, with the future. The tenses are combined depending if the main character is thinking of the day before, or if they're making plans for the future, everything in the same paragraph or the same page. not to leave on one side as well that we get a lot of idioms which make, culturally they are great and we need them. So if we are in an official exam, for example, we need to come up with these expressions, because those expressions show that we handle the language. We just not just capable of talking about, describe this picture. We can actually have our own opinion and show this naturality which the idioms give you. Expressions, phrasal verbs, prepositional verbs, word order. And yeah, for the idioms, I put specifically the ones connected to fear and death, because there are so many, and nobody seems to have done this classification, and I'm on a quest. So every week I am posting in my little group of Gothic sites, idiom of the week, and they're all connected to the Gothic, and I'm having so much fun looking for where it comes from, when it was first started, when they were first used. So it's kind of, it's fun for me as well. Also, the reader learns how to say things in different ways, which is very important when we're trying to describe. One of the biggest problems of a second language learner is that we don't know how to describe. I ask my students every time, please, let's describe this, let's describe that with your words. And they block, right? They block. They just, at the moment you take people outside the context of copying a sentence and reproducing another similar one, they get really frustrated. And that's what happens in real life. First time I went to England, I had to start describing the vocabulary I didn't have. So there you go, problem on the table. We all need to work on that problem. So then also we practice our reading skills. This is beautiful because if you have a text, you can either read it out loud, you can use audiobooks with subtitles. So you have a lot of game in that section, in that sense. So in literature, how do we benefit from the Gothic in literature? So beyond the text, oops, I've made the chat too big and I can see my own screen. There we go. So literature is the highest representation of the language. This is said by Debbie Gutsi. Gutsi, if I say that wrong, please correct me, because it's not, okay. And also we are exposed to a great variety of texts. Okay, that's general. But with the Gothic, we see that if we look at the different chronologies, if we look at the different phases of the Gothic, we are going to be exposed to texts from the past, the initial Gothic, then to the middle, different times, well, chronologically. Basically, if you think about how the language moves on over the years, we can be exposed to different text registers, vocabulary, ideology behind the text. So it's great. Also, there's a stimulation of the reader's imagination. Obviously, when we are reading, we are imagining, we're creating, we're moving our brain. We learn about chronologies, which is what you said before. Also, we see other disciplines with the genre. We're reading Frankenstein, we have science, we have medicine, we also have religion because we have beliefs. So we have a lot of other topics that come into the text. So that gives us a lot of conversation in the class. Some people might not be inclined to talk about religion, but some people might be inclined to talk about the science or medicine or the morale behind the story. So we have a lot of choice, a lot of variety of possibilities for the students to want to talk, which is one of the things that we need to do in class, speak, to practice. But also we have familiarization with literary devices, which is something that not everybody knows. And not everybody needs to know unless they are writers or they want to specialize in literature, in syntax, for example. But we have the literary devices that are really beautiful when we're writing and when we're reading, and we detect them. You have metaphors, you have similes, assonance, alliteration. And when you analyze all those, you're already also learning the language, the vocabulary. So it's a nice way of, instead of memorizing lists of words, you learn them because you have learned what they mean in a context, and you have learned the role that they have in this context. So just by seeing the logic of this word in the text, you're going to remember. So I know that there are people who like memorizing things, and there are some things that we cannot avoid memorizing, like your irregular verbs. So that's it. And we found, I keep looking for solutions, but I can't find the formula to get away from that. So also we learn writing techniques, as I said before. So the structure of the story, the main elements, how to connect all the ideas, character creation, storyline. So when we go in detail with literature, that's what we actually get as well. So when culturally, this is a very important one, because culturally, when we read a Gothic text, we see that it triggers our critical thinking, because as Sam said in one of her videos in The Origin of the Gothic, she says this beautiful phrase where the Gothic is the perfect place that creates questions. So, and that's what critical thinking does. It makes you ask the why, the how, the where, the when, the who. So these are actually the questions that we're constantly reproducing in a language context. When we learn in a second language, we use these question words a lot, precisely because we want the students to think for themselves first before we give them information. How do you think we get there? So it's a very good context as well for this. But also we're exposed to other cultures, super important. Cultures bring you vocabulary and the folklore. If we have the folklore, we have the understanding of the past, which helps us understand the present. So again, we can see for people who are, might be a little bit, oh, well, this is old fashioned, people don't speak like this anymore. Yeah, but we have nowadays this vocabulary thanks to that, and that's where it comes from. So for people like me that are very nosy and always asking why, this is a perfect context to do so. Then we can compare the cultures with your own, which opens your mental barriers. And this is really important in a globalized world in general. So it's not just because it's for learning a second language, it's just for you as a person. The same to be exposed to cosmologies. You know, you're exposed to different ideas, different gods, different creatures. And the Gothic does that very well because it's a perfect place. Then we are creating empathy and self-definition. And this is study that I was telling you before. She analyzes well, she talks about how teenagers feel identified with Gothic, and it's because they are going through this process of changing, of finding their own identity. And the Gothic text does that very well. You can either feel like the vampire is outcast because nobody understands you, or you could feel like the victim that there is maybe there waiting for the vampire to bite. I don't know. So it gives you all these different possibilities to self-define yourself and finding solutions through other people's problems, and finding solutions to their problems. You find solutions to your own without going for it, without going on purpose to find these solutions. So we also learn about the manifestations of a social group in a historical time, which is, it's great. This is what we also need to learn as people. And then if we're looking more into the European framework of reference of languages, they have an area, a section where they say that literature contributes to European culture and heritage, which is a valuable common resource to be protected and developed. Okay, it looks like this is in the small print when you go to the academy to learn your English, but this is what the European framework wants to, not just the language on its own isolated. So how does this apply to the Gothic? So it's what we were saying before, due to the nature of the topics and themes in the Gothic, such as loss, death, identity, deadly romance, yeah, like we saw yesterday, dualities, readers enforced to step out of the comfort zone and looking for solutions. That's how we connect it. So this doesn't just create or reinforce their identities as individuals and inside the communities. It also stimulates the students to talk about their opinions of different possibilities and solution problem in the target language. So again, we're stimulating the student to speak in the second language, because we're shifting away. When you ask a student in class, this is your role, you are Pepito and Pepito is going to be blah, blah, blah. I've always thought that those exercises were absolutely outrageous. I didn't feel like talking to anybody. I was like, well, this is not like me. But now you tell me about your last summer holiday. What was frustrating about your last summer holiday? Oh, I've got plenty to say. Boom, we've got it. So some people don't like to talk personal things in class, which is fine. But then you can say, invent it. I don't care if it's true or not. I just want you to talk. So they can invent their own profile if they feel more comfy. And so the Gothic, again, allows you to invent a lot of things. So this is all right. So we are looking for alternatives. So you can work on the structures to put your opinions forward, like, for example, comparative superlatives. So in this sense, you're going to use connectors like firstly, secondly, conclusion. We're going to push them to do that in the oral context as well as in the written context. Okay. So far so good, everybody? Yep. Okay, so the Gothic effects. Fred Bottin talks about the Gothic effects, and he says that the anxieties from the Gothic keep reaping, which perpetuate the tradition, also through cinema, music, etc. So how beautiful this is. The Gothic goes everywhere. It's not just in the text, it's in our everyday lives, in a lot of things we do. He says it's a hybrid form that incorporates and transforms all the literary forms, as well as developing and changing its own conventions in relation to newer modes of writing. I know it's a mouthful, this, but it's so true. Yes, if you analyze it, it's so true. It's great. It can have an impact. The Gothic has this flexibility or this characteristic that is in a lot of different texts. It's in horror, it's in terror, but it's also in our everyday lives. Sometimes we have mystery, like we said yesterday. Yeah, mystery, Gothic appears. But you might have a story with a biography that is realistic, it's not fiction, it's non-fiction, and you can have someone believing in a ghost. And that's treated as natural, as a realistic book, but beliefs of the world, beliefs of energies, this is everywhere. This comes in our nature, is in our DNA. Yeah, so we all have this thing in common. So how can we do this teaching through the Gothic? Things to bear in mind. We have to bear in mind what I was saying before the start. We have to bear in mind empathy, motivation, and curiosity, the benefits of the brain and the areas of the language. Okay, so I'm going to go through that a little bit quickly. I don't want to be too late. So the main elements of success for me, as I said before, are these three things: empathy, motivation, curiosity. And you're going to see clearly why. Let's see, I love neuroscience, I love cognition, and I'm a freak in psychology. I love all these other areas. So I'm trying to see how they can all come together and how they make sense in the Gothic too. So if we start with empathy, we see that this is a mental capacity neurologically interconnected to motivation, thanks to what we call the mirror neurons. Okay, it's very specific, but it's not difficult to understand. Among other activities, what they do is they simulate other people's behaviors and can help us to learn new things, which is what we do in second language learning. We are copying and we're reproducing. So this is where we're creating this empathy. By Baron Cohen and Will Wright, they said that empathy refers to the ability to tune into how someone else is feeling or what they might be thinking. It's like the glue of the social world. So we need these guys, and we need to create this in the second language context. So how do we apply this with the Gothic? So the connection is here. So if empathy is a type of communicative behavior that is closely related to cognitive processes, and without the empathy, communication as a form of negotiation cannot take place, then one thing that the Gothic does very well is to create highly involving situations that, as Simona says in her project, foster the student in a number of active and positive attitudes towards the target language, literature, and culture. Okay, this might sound like a lot, but it makes sense, right? So, for example, I'm going to play you a couple. I'm not going to play the 8 minutes, okay, because it's too long. But I'm going to play you a couple of minutes of this situation. I have to say, I am a super fan of Supernatural. I am devastated with the end of the season. They're like my family. I've learned so much, but that's a story for another day. So I want you to see what happens when we don't have empathy, and think about it in the second language learning context. Okay, let's see if I share this properly. A second. Right, here we go.
Of course, it's not UFOs. It's fairies.
Fairies. Okay. Well, thank you for your input.
What, flying saucers not insane enough for you?
What newspaper did you say you work for?
Look, if you want to add glitter to that glue you're sniffing, that's fine, but don't dump your wackadoo all over us. We'd rather not step.
The sound's gone. Alicia, I don't know if you can hear us, but the sound's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know if it's just because I've not shared this properly. Or some people can hear it. Oh, because I muted myself. Maybe, yeah. Okay, I'll unmute myself. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll carry on.
So you're gonna walk us through this? Or, well, I gotta tell you, Lucky, neither of us dumped. I mean, why shack up with the family? Is it a kinky thing? Do you like to play with your food? Roll over, Lucky. Speak. Go to hell. Already been. Didn't agree with me. So, look, how about I take this silver knife and I start carving some dog until you behave. You do what you got to do. Holy. UFO! UFO! Oh, dude, stop yelling. You're breaking up. I didn't catch that last part. Close encounter! Close encounter! Close encounter? What kind? First? Second? They're after me! Third kind already. Better run, man. I think the fourth kind is a butt thing. Empathy, Sam! Empathy! Now.
Okay. Right. I can see, yeah, you can see the idea. Yes, you get the idea that when there's no empathy, you know, nothing works, kind of thing. So yeah, there we go. Let's make this smaller now. Yeah, that's why I gave you this example. I don't know if you see yourselves or you see your students somehow when there's this lack of empathy, nothing happens, there's no communication, there a lot of things go wrong. So I know that we have to create as teachers, we have to create that, but also they have to come with some of it. They have to already have some kind of interest. But we can tackle that from many different angles. So that will be also will depend on how agile you are with your seducing your students to be involved in the class, you know, seducing them, you know, in the language, as in, this is nice, you're going to enjoy it. They have to be seduced somehow, in the good sense. Okay, so motivation, you saw that we don't just have empathy in this video, but we also have motivation because it's an internal process. Again, it's connected to I'll put motivation there, it's connected to empathy, right? That's a little mistake. Again, thanks to the mirror neurons. So it's a condition inside of us that desires a change. So either in the self or our environment. So when we tap into this well of energy, motivation endows the person with the drive and direction needed to engage with the environment in an adaptive, open-ended, and problem-solving sort of way. This is a definition by Reeve. So again, very important to have. How do we connect that with language and the Gothic? So if Gardner says that motivation to learn a second language refers to the extent to which the individual works or tries to learn the language because of a desire to do so and the contentment experience of these tasks, that's what happens with people who are just innate interest in the language. But some people nowadays are not really interested in the language. They just have to learn it because of work, because of other things. It's not the main reason. So for me, learning through the Gothic, what makes the students shift their attention from just the language to another interest, in this case, the learning. And with the Gothic, what they can do is read articles. For example, I write articles about identity, which is a Gothic characteristic, the sense of identity. So I can write about Gothic sense of identity in more and modern context, my students love reading that, whether they like Gothic or not, and they think, oh yeah, I feel identified, I want to know more. So this is what actually triggers their motivation, and voila, we've got the magic is there, it's happened. So they can find out about themselves too, because they're curious. We've created this curiosity that comes next. That's the great learning motivator, yeah? They say that curiosity killed the cat, poor kitty. Let's hope that nothing happens to this one because it's lovely. But it's, George Lowenstein says that curiosity is a cognitive-induced deprivation that arises from the perception of a gap in knowledge and understanding. So again, let's match it now with the language and the Gothic. So let's see if I say this name right, the Vygotskian perspective of social constructivism suggests that learning is a socially constructive process which takes place through the social interaction of learners through the environment and other people. So yes, we are curious about each other when we are in a group and people tell us the stories or their experiences. Oh, we have curiosity, unless we completely apathic, and then that would be a little bit of a problem. But normally we curious, it's in our nature to have this curiosity about each other. So in the Gothic, this interaction is what creates this curiosity towards new points of view. When we're confronted, for example, with monsters, how would you approach that situation? Or someone who's an outcast, or if you are like the outcast, or people's extreme reactions in extreme situations. Oh, I would have done that. Oh, how do you know you would have done that? And this is what Gothic does the best. Yeah, it creates all these contexts where curiosity can be aroused. Benefits on the brain. This is so important. In the class, people, I think the students in general, they need to know that a lot of the things that we do as teachers, if you are a teacher, is that we tend to select things that are beneficial in more than one way. And if you're a student and you don't teach, you're gonna think the same. I suppose you will agree with me that you want to come out of a class changed, right? Not just with information, but also with that you have learned something that is going to be practical, that is going to create you more questions, that you're curious. So the neuroscience behind Gothic literature is that it provides the perfect context for higher order thinking skills, which is called HOTS. Okay, so this is because reading Gothic literature requires a high cognitive processing in itself. There are a lot of things going on in a Gothic text. And if we add to that, learning a second language, the benefits are even greater. We are activating more areas of the brain. Through literature, we are activating experiences that promote creative information processing by recognition of relationships between what the students learn and what they already know. So this is super important. This is what's happening in our brain. So some of the advantages, and there are more, is that neurons fire together, and this contributes to neuroplasticity in the brain, which is very important. Yeah. Incorporation of new information to already acquire related memory. So we are reinforcing our pathways, but we also adding information. Or sometimes we might be breaking some pathways that are not useful and creating new ones, which again, it helps to our neuroplasticity. We become better also in organizing, prioritizing, comparing, contrasting, synthesizing, mainly in writing, but also in the speaking context. So we are taking this outside the academic environment and the learning environment. This can be useful in your working life and in your personal life too. So when we give an opinion, we also contributed with the metacognition. Metacognition is to become aware of your own awareness, which is super important in critical thinking. And basically, it's a good mental anti-aging. And since I'm in my mid-40s, this is very important because you don't want your neurons to die out. So basically, as a result, what we have is that we activate our critical thinking skills and become better thinkers. Very important. So how can we apply this to the different areas of the language? I'm not going to go in depth, as I said. I think basically what I'm going to say about this is that languages should be taught in a balanced way. So we cannot neglect any part of the language, any area. We need to know grammar, we need to know vocabulary, we need the reading comprehension, we need to practice the listening, we need to practice the speaking and our written expression. Mainly because this is basically what the language is made of, but also in official exams, this is what you're going to be asked to develop. And for that reason, but also the exposure. You need to be exposed to the language you're learning every day. So that's something that I really emphasize with my students. They have to have the mindset, the right mindset, that to take an active position as well. They can't just be sat there waiting for the teacher, for me to deliver the lesson and do nothing in exchange. They have to work really hard, and they have to work at home. They have to be consistent. So by using programs, books, texts that are of their interest, we go back to the motivation, curiosity, blah, blah, we see that this happens, and this is perfect, and it's natural, and they enjoy it. It's not forced. Oh, you're giving me homework. When I used to give homework in the traditional way, people didn't do the homework, and they gave me all the most stupid excuses. Now that I'm saying, okay, it's up to you. How is your timetable looking like this week? Oh yeah, well, I've done some writing, and then I've watched some TV. They choose what they want to do, which is really good. Give them that freedom. And then, yes, you are there to guide them. Okay, I can suggest this program or that program. So like David Crystal says, the successful language learning for him is the key for learning is to know how to bring a structure and use together. Okay, so we have to find this practicability of the language without forgetting the rules, without forgetting when can we write, or when should we write a formal text or an informal text. We need to know the difference as well. So it's everything. Yeah, the language is everything. It's not just speaking like the Queen, or and then, you know, I've heard teachers of all sorts. Well, American English is not English. Oh, come on, give me a break. What's that? Everybody who speaks the language is speaking the language, right? And then we all have different accents, and we all have different backgrounds, but at the end of the day, is the language that is being used out in the world nowadays. And then, yeah, if you want to know your classics, fine, but we don't all have to speak like a Queen. So with this, we're going to be wrapping up nicely, more or less. I have a couple of videos at the end to show some examples, but for me, some of the elements in the Gothic elements in the second language acquisition is that we all have in common fears. We all fear something. Yeah, fear is innate in the human beings. It's an ancient feeling, and you can find this in many different texts. As I said, they don't have to be just horror. Gothic is everywhere. We can see the sublime and feelings of awe can be found in descriptions, not only landscapes and not only in horror. They can be in something that makes the person go, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed, maybe by looking at a painting, or nature, just going outside and looking at your animals playing in the garden. So you feel these feelings, right? The uncanny can be seen also in descriptions of everyday events that terrorize the characters. For example, my friend Tracy Fahey, she's a Gothic writer, and she uses the home to talk about the uncanny. She does that very, very well. And it's everyday situations that make you really uncomfortable. So folklore and traditions, very important. The Gothic, they hide some of the dark past, and that can be, people are interested in folklore. Oh, I didn't know where that came from. So people want to read more. So they are going to pay attention to the language, to the vocabulary, the structures. Then inexplicable events that create curiosity and a necessity of looking for answers. And also, for me, very important, the hero's journey in the Gothic, because it talks to those who see themselves as misunderstood or outcast. Okay, this is just to mention some of them, but there are many more. Again, we're going back to my Supernatural. I know it's just the last one of Supernatural. Okay, this one is very funny because some teachers creating material out there, and I think it's hilarious. You know, teachers were obsessed with the alphabet. So this is a little example of alphabet in context, as I would say. So there we go. It's always takes a little bit. Sorry for the swearing words. It's not on purpose. It's not that I just like swearing. It's just that they come out like that in TV.
A is for
Ass butt. Ass butt?
B is for
Boo-hoo! I am so sorry your feelings are hurt. Princess!
C is for
Ass, get out of my ass.
I was never in here.
D is for
Death is our bitch.
E is for
Eat it, Twilight.
F is for
Fight the fairies! You fight those fairies!
G is for
Genital herpes.
H is for
Hope your apple pie is freaking worth it!
I is for
I lost my shoe.
J is for
Jefferson Starships. Huh?
K is for
Kevin freaking Solo.
L is for
Lucifer, you're my brother, and I love you. But you are a great big bag of dicks.
M is for N is for
Nipples?
O is for
Oh, crap. I'm a paid whore.
P is for
Pudding!
Q is for
Queen is always on the lookout for new squires.
R is for S is for
Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch, that's really on there. Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch!
T is for
That was scary!
U is for V is for
Velma was right.
W is for Winchesters.
Winchester.
Winchester.
Winchester!
X is for
X-Files is a TV show. This is real.
Y is for
Yesterday was Tuesday, right? But today is Tuesday too.
Z is for
Zoinks.
Okay, so as you can see, we can create alphabet, we can create all sorts of things. Let's see if I can minimize this now. Yep, okay. So, I mean, it's, I don't know, we have here some examples of quotes. I don't know if you want to, if we have time for that, Sam, you'll have to say, because we have some quotes and maybe we go over for 5 more minutes. This is also good in the sense that, yeah, we can do, okay. It's 2 minutes of this one and then almost one of the next one. This is an example of also the written text. I mean, you're not going to see the characters talking, but you can see how someone has put the main phrases, and then the students can actually read and they can decode the information, and then they can find examples of solutions to daily problems. This is what we were saying before. Okay, so they can see that. Okay, I can see people's comments there. Yes, true. I mean, it's so much that you can learn from series and from, you know, different contexts, and the Gothic appears everywhere. This is the last one is very quickly. There's a swearing, so I apologize. I don't know if you ever saw Misfits, but I thought they were a really good example for a lot of things. Okay, let's see. Mainly for accents, yeah, when people get really into accents, these accents are, well, there you
His
go.
head's all cut up and I'm standing there with a broken bottle in my hand. I don't remember doing anything.
That is definitely superpowership.
What are we going to do?
We don't have to do anything. We keep our heads down and stay the fuck out of it.
Because that always works.
This is the kind of shit where we need that guy in the maths.
Why do we always have to get involved? Can't we just do normal stuff that normal people do? Like, go for brunch?
What the fuck is brunch?
So yeah, you have there the problem of a lot of people. Yes, second learners. What is that? You know, can someone tell me? So, okay, that's it. People, thank you. I hope you have enjoyed that. And I suppose now we can open the chat